so far, I didn't look at
Okay.
this one. I'm sorry to say.
So we are, I believe, chapter 24, verse 4.
Correct.
Hold on. Chapter 24, verse 4.
All right, so this is
Okay, you look at Eitz Chaim. Can someone tell me the page?
no, because none of us have Eitz Chaim.
Okay.
Chapter 24, verse 4.
All right, chapter. It is 20. Okay, I got it.
Okay, so God has just finished revealing God's self, right? Yeah. So this is the end of the revelation.
Right.
So Moses has not gone up the mountain yet.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
we were talking about that last time. Has he
Right.
gone up yet? Has he not?
Right. Okay. So it's done, and then he says, Moses wrote down all the commandments of the Lord. Okay. So this is an interesting little break here. I don't know if you can see it in your text, but in mine, the verse 4 continues with early in the morning, or however it's translated for you.
Yes.
But in the Hebrew text, they actually split it. They actually say that the end of this thought is Moses then wrote down all the commandments of the Lord, period, full stop, new paragraph. Early in the morning, he set up an altar. So that's another example of the Christian break versus a Jewish break. Right? The Christians say that this is one whole verse, and we Jews say no, it's actually two different verses.
And why is it two different verses?
Two different thoughts. To the end of one thought and the beginning of a new thought. So we keep their numbering, but we paginate it differently.
Okay, now Rashi has a lot of commentary on what this is that he wrote. And he wrote the commandments that they were commanded at Marah. And then the note says, all the words of Hashem here refers to the book of the covenant mentioned in verse 7 below, for that is what Moses wrote here. It does not have the same meaning that it had in the preceding verse. So there you go.
Is that for 4? Is that for 4 or 5?
Yes.
Okay, this book says something different.
So verse 3 is talking about all the rules.
Right.
And there refers to the 7 Noahide laws.
Right.
Rules about Shabbat, honoring your father and mother, the red heifer, establishing a court system. Those are all the things that were given at Marah. So this one, Rashi says, is all the laws that were given from Genesis all the way up to the giving of the Torah, including Marah. I don't know what's different between these two.
Huh.
Can I see what you think of what this book says, Rabbi, or not?
Yeah, go, just like always.
Okay, under 4, under wrote down, it says, this is the document termed, quote, the record of the covenant, Sefer HaBrit. In verse, well, you mentioned verse 7. It's the introduction to chapter 21 and comment to 24, 7. Setting down the terms of the covenant in writing was an essential part of the ratification process of treaties in the ancient Near East. It made the treaty a legal reality.
Yeah, when it talks about, when it refers and it says, all the words of Hashem here refers to the book of the covenant mentioned in verse 7 below. I look at verse 7 in the next, on the next page, actually. And it says, he took the book of the covenant and read in earshot of the people. And this is where they say everything that Hashem has said we will do and we will obey, but still is not telling us.
Well, so Rashi on that verse repeats. He says, this is from Genesis all the way up to giving of the Torah.
Yeah.
So we've got, okay, so God reveals God's self to everyone.
Right.
Then gives Moses the Torah verbally, orally. Then Moses writes down everything from Genesis up to that moment.
Right.
Then in verse, I'm skipping verse 5 and 6 right now, but then in verse 7, he will take what he has written down and read it to all the people. That seems to be the progression here.
Right. And what he has written down is everything from Genesis to what they were, to the Noahite laws.
No, Genesis up until this moment, up until Sinai.
This moment. Okay. But this moment on Sinai is before we get
what?
the 10 Commandments. I'm lost in space.
This is
Okay.
confusing.
So we get the 10 Commandments twice. The first time we actually get them 3 times, but the first time we get them is God speaking them to us. That we already heard, right?
Okay.
We already heard when God spoke them to us, or spoke them to Moses, depending on which commentary. Then, so that happens. That's revelation.
Right.
That's what we remember on Shavuot. Then I guess God gives Moses the rest of the Torah up until this story.
Right.
And then Moses writes it down.
My phone just binged. I'll turn
No,
it.
it's Arisha. It's fine. It
Oh.
was me too.
Oh, okay.
He just said his son isn't feeling well, so he won't join us.
Okay.
So then Moses wrote all of that down up until this moment. And then Moses reads that to everyone.
Right.
Then, in a little bit, he's going to go up the mountain and get the 10 Commandments in written form.
Oh,
so he doesn't have it in written form yet.
Well, he has it in written form in his own handwriting. He doesn't have the tablets yet. Okay?
Pencil. Thank you.
So I can give you one.
Okay.
And allowed to the people.
So wait, so let's just go back to
Do you want
verse
to
5
read
and
the
6.
beginning of 7 or what?
No. We're going back to 5 and 6 because we didn't read those, or actually the rest of 4. So early in the morning, he set up an altar at the foot of the mountain with 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. He designated some young men among the Israelites, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed bulls as offerings of well-being to the Lord. I'll just do one more verse. Moses took one part of the blood and put it in basins, and the other part of the blood he dashed against the altar. Okay, so this whole ritual here. So according to Rashi, some young men refers to the firstborn. Okay, so this is interesting. Why? So why was it the firstborn? So they were the firstborn, as Onkelos says, for it was the firstborn who performed the sacrifices. Now, why? Who performed sacrifices later in the Torah?
The priests.
Right, the Levites. But at this point, it's the firstborn. It's not the priests. The firstborn are the chosen ones, so to speak, here.
Right.
So.
Did it matter how old they were?
Right. So the next thing he says is, I don't know why the firstborn should be called young men. Perhaps because verse 11 describes the elders as the leaders of Israel. The firstborn were called young in contrast to them, in allusion to the fact that they were not designated for their wisdom as elders would be, but because of their birth status. But the straightforward sense would be that they were men so young that they had not tasted sin. For it was they who were the select and the sanctified ones amongst the people. So it's a question as to why he calls them young men. It's unclear.
So you're assuming they're under 13? Is that so?
No.
No.
Well, he may be saying that. I'm not. Your Onkelos may have been saying that, but I think.
Well, what do you mean? I mean,
there are two perspectives.
What else is tasting sin? So.
No, there are two perspectives. One perspective is they're called young in contrast to the elders.
Yeah.
Who, and just because they don't have the wisdom that the elders have, and they weren't actually young. That's just a term to describe them in contrast to another group. The other is that maybe they were actually young and they hadn't tasted sin before. So we don't know the answer to that. Let me see this. The young men were the young. Ibn Ezra says the young men were the youngest of the firstborn, who had the strength to present the burnt offerings. For the elders went higher up the mountain than did the young men.
So they had
Okay.
to have a certain strength.
Right, I guess so.
So there you really are talking about age, aren't you?
Right.
Yeah.
And Chizkuni says also that why were they young men? In order to inaugurate them into observance of the commandments. This sounds actually a little bit like the first bar mitzvah ceremony.
Yeah, yeah.
I was thinking of the age of bar mitzvah.
That's kind of interesting. I wonder if this has ever been connected to bar mitzvah. I've never heard of it.
Huh. It sounds like it would be about that age. So.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's the first thing that hit me.
I wonder. Okay. So then,
Did you read this? I have in here amidst that talks is the use of blood in a covenant is not found elsewhere in the Bible. Do you have that in there? This is under 6. Let's see.
Go ahead. What else does it say?
I have to go back. There's you read about the part of the book. Moses performs a standard ritual with only one part of the blood, literally half the blood. He stored the other half in basins for sprinkling on the people later. The two halves, there's a parenthesis, it says verse 8. We didn't get there though. Two halves were for the two parties to the covenant, God and the people Israel. Use of blood in a covenant is not found elsewhere in the Bible. The ordination of Aaron as high priest also involved dabbing blood of the sacrificial lamb of ordination on parts of his body and on the altar. It's possible that blood in both these ceremonies, covenant and ordination, functions mysteriously to cement the bond between the involved parties. It is also possible that its function was purgation, intended to keep purity at bay.
Right, to purge, yeah. So one of the questions here is what did when it says he dashed it on the people?
Yeah.
So in our verse it says he dashed it against. Wait a second.
On this.
Okay, he took half the blood, put it in basins.
Yeah.
The other part he dashed against the altar, and then the blood that he put in the basins he dashed on the people. That's over in verse 8, and there's a big debate as to whether he actually did that or not. Because how would you dash blood on all the people? There weren't enough people. One of the interesting things is that the word basin here, wait, let me see. Aganot, I guess is basin. This is the only place in the entire Bible that this word is found.
Wow.
Yeah. That's what I read.
A round goblet. It's a little bit like a round goblet.
The lamb ordination on parts of his body and on the altar.
So dashing it against the altar is the God part, and dashing it against the people is the people part of this covenant. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you were saying, Lenore?
That's what it seems like.
Yeah.
And it functions mysteriously to cement the bond between the involved parties.
Right. So, I mean, this should definitely harken back to circumcision and What else? Wait, there were some other things here. Where was it?
They're like bringing in the part of as you say, bar
And
mitzvah.
immersion.
So where's immersion, though? See,
Well,
so
I have under Rashi's notes, he's actually talking about two basins, one to catch, for the peace offering, one to sprinkle on the people. And part of that says our rabbis learned from, and then I'm sorry, I forgot to put my glasses on, it's in Hebrew, that our ancestors entered the covenant through circumcision, immersion, and sprinkling of blood. So does the immersion mean the mikveh?
yes, but what's interesting is that that's not here.
It's not mentioned in mine.
Well, it's by Rashi. It's a Rashi note. It's under, Rashi elucidated. I have the Saperstein edition.
Right, but so
let me get my glasses.
From
I can read
this.
Hold on.
The comment, when they say it is possible, I guess, it's somebody considering that blood.
Here, I'll read you the Hebrew. Maybe it says, our rabbis learned from here. And then it says, Shaniv Nitzo Avotanu Lab Rit. Does that make any sense, David?
The first two words don't, but Avotenu Labrit is our fathers to the covenant.
All right, then the first word is Shanich Nitzo or Tzu. All right, Shanich.
All right, don't worry about it. It's not.
I'm sorry, I can't read it.
No, don't worry about it. It just means our sages, I think.
Okay.
No, because that's what my translation says. From this, our sages learned.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
so that's it's just our rabbis learned. Oh,
right.
Okay.
But I think what's happening here is, the rabbis are seeing this covenant taking place, and they're seeing the blood being dashed, and they're saying that from this experience we learn that there are three ways. I don't know if it's three ways or
circumcision, immersion, and sprinkling of blood. Because you never have sprinkling without the act of immersion preceding it.
Except here, you don't. You don't have it here.
The only one this book mentions is possible that blood in both these ceremonies, covenant and ordination, functions mysteriously to cement the bond between the involved parties. So that's God and, isn't that God and the people?
Yeah, but we're talking about something different. We're asking what has to happen in order to enter a covenant.
Yeah.
And this covenant here is the dashing of blood. And then I see the same comment that you only dash blood after ritual immersion, but we don't have ritual immersion here. So I don't understand where that comes from.
Huh.
I don't quite understand that. That's okay.
Number 5, the note. Well, it comes from Yavamos 46b, Kerasos 9a.
Right, that's the Talmud. Yavamot.
You don't have one handy, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't mean to make you look it up. I just thought it would help.
What do you say, 46b?
Yeah. Yevamot. Yevamot.
Yevamot. Hold on a second. Okay, let's see.
I don't have any sound.
Yeah, we're looking something up.
Oh, Frida, it looked like you were talking.
if a proselyte was circumcised, hold on, I'm sorry. I'm not sure if this is what they're referring to, but maybe it is. If a proselyte was circumcised but had not performed the prescribed ritual ablution, what is ablution?
Going in the water. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Rabbi Eliezer said, behold, he is a proper convert. For so we find that our forefathers were circumcised and had not performed ritual ablution. Hold on a second. Let me look up that reference. 52. Those who departed Egypt as heathens and received the Torah on Mount Sinai when they were, so to speak, converted to Judaism. Okay, so Rabbi Eliezer says, wait, I lost it. Rabbi Eliezer says, if you are circumcised but you don't go in a mikvah, you're still converted. If you go in a mikvah but you haven't been circumcised, Rabbi Joshua says, then you've converted. And because we find that from our mothers, whereas 53, that doesn't really tell us anything. Okay.
Okay, so I've got. I'm looking up the other Keresotes 9a, and it is also talking about the non-Jew becoming a Jew and the ritual circumcision and the ritual bathing. Just as you were reading, it's the same sort of reference.
But
right? So just to be clear, the Rabbi Eliezer says that if you are circumcised but you don't go in the mikvah, then you're kosher. Rabbi Joshua says if you go in the mikvah but you don't get circumcised, you're kosher. But the sages, when this is the final answer, they say you have to do
both. So that's why this here, I guess it's assuming the ablution or the mikvah here, because it only mentions, it doesn't specifically speak to it.
Right. Although I'm a little confused between, so why does, Rashi says you need circumcision, ritual immersion, and the dashing of blood.
Right.
It seems in the Talmud here that they've left out dashing of blood. That it's almost as if the dashing of blood and circumcision have been merged into one thing.
Well, no, it's like I think what that particular part of the Talmud, I feel like I shouldn't even be acting so smart, but it just seems like we've been referred to that place in the Talmud simply to help us understand why mikvah wasn't mentioned specifically in this situation. We have circumcision implied or mentioned, and we have the sprinkling of blood, but immersion is not specifically mentioned here. So that we're sent by Rashi to the Talmud to read what we've just been reading, where we learn that circumcision can or cannot include the immersion, but there seems to be a connection somehow with the two, and here, because it isn't explicitly mentioned, we know that it's making a choice. It's saying you have to have both the circumcision and the immersion.
Well, but what Rabbi said before, I thought sounded very logical, which was they combined the circumcision and the blood because it's two processes. Working with that entail the blood.
I didn't understand. I don't understand.
Do you understand what I said, Rabbi?
No.
Say that again, Lenore.
Okay, the idea of, you mentioned before, they probably combined the blood with the idea of with the circumcision, and so it was only two things, not three.
And in the Talmud, it sort of supports that. It sort of supports that because it says you can be circumcised and not have ablution or immersion in water, and you've become a Jew.
Yeah, so they combined two things that had to do with blood.
But here you see it's being, at least in Rashi's note, he's being specific, and he is mentioning circumcision, immersion, and the sprinkling of blood. So the circumcision, Rashi says, took place in Egypt. And
they didn't have a mikvah.
Right.
And so the Talmud, that he's quoting the Talmud there, because the Talmud says that, well, the Talmud uses that story,
Right.
that the men were circumcised when they were coming out of Egypt, and then they converted here at Mount Sinai. They use that as proof, or Rabbi Eliezer uses that as proof for you don't actually need to go into the mikvah.
Okay. But
then that's rejected by the rabbi.
I see. Oh, okay.
But my question answered, and that is, where the heck what's the deal with this dashing of blood? That seems to be nowhere other than here.
Right.
And in Rashi. And I don't understand that.
Yeah. Well, there is never a sprinkling without the... there. See, now that's interesting. You can have the circumcision without the immersion. You've become a Jew. But you can't have the sprinkling without the immersion preceding it. And so the question is, where did that come from? Right?
So there are two questions. Number one, one question is, where did it come from? Meaning they didn't immerse, so how can he be sprinkling blood on them now? The other question is, where did it go? Now, today we immerse, but we don't sprinkle blood.
Exactly.
So there's a midrash by Sadia Gaon, who says that this is actually, this whole sprinkling of blood is an illusion, as if to say your blood may be spilled with impunity, just as this blood is, if you do not keep the covenant. That he didn't actually, this isn't actually a part of the ritual. This is just a sign, a signal.
Yeah.
But made a big deal out of it, though, putting it in the bowl and.
Yeah.
Well, there again, you say make a big deal out of it. I think in that time, sprinkling of blood and the letting of blood out of animals for all kinds of reasons. I just saw a thing on PBS, a tribe in Africa celebrating something, a wedding or something, and they caught an animal and they, slit where our big blood vessel is in our neck, and they were draining the blood for a ritual reason. So I can imagine in this time when this was happening, that they certainly would have used blood as a sign of life, and they would have sprinkled it, and they would have drawn it for sacrifices and so forth.
Yeah.
And this just might have been a very meaningful ritual, to teach them.
Maybe hiding in another midrash somewhere.
I'll make one up. I wish Gina were here. She'd have answers too from other esoteric places.
Yeah. Okay. I still don't understand that. It's really frustrating. That's okay. So then verse 7.
Well, let's bring it up again next week.
Yeah, Palestina. All right. So then.
No. But we'll bring it up see what she says.
What's wrong? Come here, honey. Okay. Verse 7. Then he took the record of the covenant and read aloud to the people. And they said, all that the Lord has spoken, we will faithfully do. Or I would translate it, we will do and we will hear. Or we will do and we will understand. Okay.
I have we will do and we will obey.
Right. So Rashbam says, literally, it means we will do and we will heed. And what he said, the way he understands that is, we will do what God has already spoken, and we will heed what God commands us from now on and fulfill it.
All it says here is, and they said, all that the Lord has spoken, we will faithfully do.
Right. That's a bad translation, if you ask me.
I like what you said, David, just before what Lenore's translation was, that they will hear or do what he has said and will obey what he is about to say in the future.
Right. Listen to this. This is Ibn Ezra. This is beautiful. Literally, we will do and we will hear. Adding we will hear to what they had already said in verse 3. Because remember back in verse 3, it said we will do everything that is written down. Okay? So we will do everything that is written down, and we will constantly hear them, in that they will never be forgotten from our mouths. Sadia says that it is another case where the Torah is written out of chronological order. And what they really said was, we will hear and we will do. Or that's a cop-out to me. To say it just wasn't in chronological order is like, that's missing a great opportunity to come up with some funky interpretations.
It sounds better if it's not thought that way.
Or it might mean we will do the commandments that are planted in our hearts, and we will heed the commandments that have been revealed to us. Or we will do all the commandments God has given us so far, and we will heed the commandments that will be given in the future. Or we will do the positive commandments, and we will heed the prohibitions and not do them.
Never heard that one.
So, a bunch of different ways to understand that. So Chizkuni says, when it says he took the record of the covenant and read it aloud to the people. So remember what Rashi said. Rashi said that's everything from Genesis up until now. Chizkuni says, no, it wasn't. It was Leviticus chapters 25 and 26. Why? Because the Torah was not written in chronological order. And then Abarbanel says it was what he had written the night before. In verse 3.
Oh, no.
Wait. So in verse 3, Moses went and repeated Moses went and repeated to the people all the commands of the Lord and all the rules, and all the people answered with one voice, saying, all the things the Lord has commanded, we will do, right? So they've already heard all of this. Because Moses said it to them. Now he's reading it to them. So what does Abarbanel say? It says, he reads to them the same thing that he had written the night before. Why? He gave them a chance to sleep on it.
Oh my Lord.
Right? So what? No, that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Right? So they heard it. They slept on it.
They thought about it.
And then he read it to them again. And then they said, we will faithfully do.
Oh, that's a good comment.
I like that one.
I'm just reading another little Sforno comment here, but it doesn't add much. Now, it doesn't add much. I'm not sure I even understand what Sforno is saying. We will do and we will listen. The Sforno is paraphrasing the Mishnah in Avot, Perkei Avot 1.3. Be not like servants who serve their master with the thought of reward. Rather be like servants who serve their master without thought of reward. I don't understand how that.
So that's actually from he's quoting Pirkei Avot. That's a direct quote from Ethics of Our Fathers, and it's basically saying we will do and we will understand. Meaning we're going to do this whether or not anything good comes from it. Right. The reason we're going to do these things is not because we think we're going to get a reward, but we're doing them because, why do I have to do this? Because I said so.
Gotcha. Okay. Simple as that.
I think so.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. So then Moses took.
I had a question before you go ahead here. This is also there's a section here that says functions mysteriously to cement the bond between the individual involved parties. It is possible that its function was purgation intended to keep impurity at bay. When they're talking about impurity, it may not be important, but what important purity are they talking about?
Could you read that comment one more time, Lenore?
The covenant here, if I go back to the beginning, it is possible that blood in both these ceremonies, covenant and ordination, functions mysteriously to cement the bond between the involved parties. It is also possible that its function was purgation, intended to keep impurity at bay. What are they meaning by impurity?
Impurity in the Bible is if you come in contact with a dead body, or if you have a seminal emission, or if a woman has her period. Those are all ways of, or if you have leprosy, those are all ways of becoming impure.
Okay.
Okay, so then verse 8 says, Moses took the blood and dashed it on the people and said, This is the blood of the covenant that the Lord now makes with you concerning all these commands. Because there's other on account of the people. He could not have dashed it on each one of them, meaning on each person, but only on some of them, on the leaders, or more likely on those where the crowd was greatest.
Now I have something different. Well, again, Rashi, and he sprinkled it. This is from Targum, and he sprinkled it on the altar to atone on behalf of the people.
Right.
So he didn't
That's from
sprinkle it on the people.
Right. But the problem that I have with that is that
it does.
the problem that I have with that is that earlier in verse 6, it said he dashed half of it on the altar and the other half he set aside for this. So now he's dashing it again on the altar?
Well, this 8 says Moses took the blood and dashed it on the people.
No, I understand that, but Onkelos translates it differently. He translates it as he didn't do it on the people, he did it on their behalf. So Gersonity said, no, that's not him. Hold on. Abarbanel says that basically the same thing that Rashi says, that he didn't dash it on the people, but instead he says he dashed it on the 12 pillars. Remember back in verse 4, Moses, early in the morning, he set up the altar and then 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel.
Right.
So Abarbanel says that he actually dashed it on the 12 pillars on behalf of the people.
Yeah.
And that makes sense to me.
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't know why would Onkelos say that this half was dashed against the altar also? That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, wait a minute. In 6, what I have is from Sforno. He half of the blood he dashed against the altar. He considered the altar as the emissary of God, the Blessed One, for the purpose of entering into the covenant. Therefore, it received half the blood. The other half was sprinkled on the people who were entering into the covenant. So,
yes, but your Onkelos commentary or Rashi commentary just said it wasn't sprinkled on the people.
Yeah, I know that's why I'm reading this, but it wasn't on the people. It was on the 12 pillars.
No. That's what mine said. Yours said, Rashi says,
right.
Rashi quotes Onkelos and says that it was sprinkled on the altar, not on the 12 pillars.
Right.
And that's what I don't understand. Why would both halves be sprinkled on the altar?
Well, what I'm trying to say with Sforno is what he's saying here. Half the blood was dashed on the altar. We all agree on that. The other half, it says on the people. But according to what you read before this, the people could mean those 12 pillars.
Right, but according to what you read, the people could mean the altar. Look at Rashi. Look at you quoted Rashi before.
Right. And you bring on the altar.
Right.
Yeah.
And Rashi quotes the Targum Onkelos,
Yes.
who says he dashed it on the altar. Why
Yes.
did he? I don't understand why he suggests that the second half was also dashed on the altar. I get
Right.
why it would be dashed on the pillars. That makes sense to me. But
All
why
right.
would they dash the second half on the altar?
Hold on. There's a note here. I'm going down to 3. Looking here refers, looking. Ay, ay, ay. What are you talking about? 8. Oh, it's 2. Excuse me. 2. According to Onkelos, the verse should be rendered, and he sprinkled it on behalf of the people. Not
Yeah.
on the people, on behalf. So at first he sprinkles it on the altar, but then rather than he sprinkled it on the people, he sprinkled it on behalf of the people. According
Yeah,
to
we know
Rashi, Moses sprinkled this blood upon the people, while according to Onkelos, he sprinkled it upon the altar.
Right. No, we know that. But my question is, why does Onkelos say that this blood that was meant for the people was dashed against the altar? We already had blood dashed against the altar.
But not for the people.
So you're saying that the first blood that was dashed against the altar was for God, and the second blood that was dashed against the altar was for the people.
That's what this is saying, not me.
Right. And what I'm saying is that it makes a heck of a lot more sense to me that blood dashed against the altar would symbolize or represent God's half of the bargain.
Right.
But I don't understand why dashing it against the altar would symbolize the people's half of the bargain.
He's doing it in the name of.
I know, but I don't understand why. It makes a heck of a lot more sense to me to dash that blood on behalf of the people against the 12 pillars. Those represent the people. The altar doesn't represent the people; it represents God.
I know, but aren't we saying that this covenant is between God and the people?
Yes.
They're partners in this.
Right, but look, you have 2 basins.
Yeah.
Okay? Basin
Right.
1, basin 2.
Right.
The blood in this basin is dashed against the altar.
Right.
That's
For God. That's to indicate God.
Right. The blood in this basin, it seems like there are 3 options. Option number 1 is it's dashed on the people.
Yeah.
Option number 2 is it's dashed against the 12 pillars. Option number 3 is that it's dashed against the altar again.
Yes. Yes.
I don't understand why we would suggest that it was dashed against the altar. There's already been blood there, and the altar represents God, and so that makes sense. It makes a lot more sense to me that this blood would have been dashed against the 12 pillars.
But suppose the altar does not represent God. Suppose it represents the covenant itself. God's covenant with us, and the blood, both bloods. One for Hashem, one for the people.
I hear what you're saying. I just I don't think I buy
This one isn't as complex, and it adds into it again that this is in the use of the blood is in a covenant is not found elsewhere in the Bible. And it talks about the ordination of Aaron as high priest, also involved having the blood of the sacrificial lamb. I mean, it doesn't all come together. It just all the things that it's being said come together.
I think we have to really know what the altar represents. We put things on the altar for God, for Hashem. We put things on the altar. And it's almost as if we're sending it to him.
Right.
Okay? So.
Well, the last statement, it's complex, obviously, because I read this again, because to me, this is not unclear. It's possible that blood in both these ceremonies, covenant and ordination, functions mysteriously to cement the bond between the involved parties. And it's also possible that its function was purgation, intended to keep impurity at bay. It just sounds like, you can interpret it in various ways. I don't know that there's an answer.
I'm sure there's an answer somewhere. They're
suggesting here this is a mysterious thing.
Pardon me?
he's stating, whoever wrote it is stating that, it may be, it's mysterious.
Well, what's interesting to me is that it's actually, at first reading, it's actually not mysterious at all. It actually makes we don't have to.
Very easy. It's
Right.
very, I agree with that.
We don't have to interpret it at all. It says they sprinkled it on the people. Done. That makes perfect sense. But all these rabbis were the ones who came in and said, "Yeah, I'm not sure." They're all the ones who screwed. All right, I'm gonna call it for today.
Oh, okay.
because I have to go teach, and also because my brain is hurting.
Your brain. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It's okay. But I will see you all next Tuesday.
Where are we starting? Let's mark it.
We'll start with verse 9.
Well, we may want to go back. Remember.
Yeah, we may want to go back.
Yeah. Okie dokie.
All right.
Have a
wonderful rest of the day.